The last place 16-year-old Kira Patel expected to make history was in the basement of the Mauna Kea Deep Space Observatory. While other teens spent their summer vacations at beaches or mall food courts, she had begged her way into an internship analyzing radio telescope data, searching for signs of distant pulsars. Her parents thought she was crazy to waste her summer staring at spectrograms, but Kira knew this was exactly where she belonged. The ancient cooling system hummed overhead as she adjusted her thick-rimmed glasses, squinting at the endless streams of data flowing across her holographic display. Something wasn't right with the signal she'd been tracking for the past 3 hours. Unlike the regular patterns of natural phenomena, this signal seemed to shift and change, almost as if it were trying to avoid detection. "Hey, Mr. Rodriguez," she called out to her supervisor, who was dozing in his chair nearby. "Could you take a look at this?" The aging astronomer shuffled over, his coffee mug leaving rings on the desk as he leaned in to examine her findings. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the data. "This can't be right," he muttered, more to himself than to Kira. "These patterns, they're not random, but they're not natural either." Kira's heart raced as she pulled up more historical data. "Look at this. The signal's been appearing every 27 days, exactly when this section of the Kuiper belt is visible from Earth. But it's never been strong enough to trigger our automated detection systems." The next few hours passed in a blur as they verified and re-verified their findings. The signal was definitely artificial, but unlike anything in their database of known human transmissions. Even more intriguing, it seemed to be coming from an object that was maintaining a perfect orbit among the ice and rock of the Kuiper belt, something that should have been impossible without constant course corrections. As the sun set behind the volcano outside, Mr. Rodriguez made a series of urgent calls to his superiors. Kira knew she should probably head back to her aunt's house where she was staying for the summer, but she couldn't tear herself away from the data. There was something about the signal's pattern that tugged at her mind, like a half-remembered dream. Using an algorithm she'd been developing in her spare time, Kira began processing the signal through different filters. Most produced nothing but static, but when she applied a specific frequency transformation, something extraordinary happened. The seemingly random patterns resolved into a series of geometric shapes, perfect triangles, squares, and circles, arranged in what could only be a deliberate sequence. "It's not just a signal," she whispered to herself. "It's a key." The next morning, Kira arrived early to find the observatory in chaos. Government officials in dark suits prowled the hallways, and she was quickly shuttled into a series of debriefing meetings. They asked endless questions about her discovery, but shared nothing in return. As she watched them box up her research and declare it classified, she realized with growing certainty that they would bury this discovery in some deep government vault, never to see the light of day. That night, unable to sleep, Kira sat cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by printouts of the signal data she'd managed to save to her personal device before it was confiscated. The shapes danced before her eyes as she sketched them in her notebook, trying to understand their significance. Her hand moved almost of its own accord, drawing connections between the patterns until suddenly, she gasped. When overlaid in the right sequence, the geometric shapes formed a star map, but not of stars as they appeared now. This was a map of how the stars had been arranged thousands of years ago, with one specific point marked by an intricate symbol. A point that, accounting for stellar drift, now lay deep in the Kuiper belt. Kira's hands trembled as she made the calculations again and again. She wasn't just looking at an alien signal, she was looking at directions to something that had been hidden in our solar system since before humans had invented the wheel. Something that had been waiting to be found. As dawn broke over the Hawaiian mountains, Kira came to a decision. She couldn't let this discovery be buried in some government facility. Whatever was out there in the Kuiper belt, it was meant to be found, not by governments or militaries, but by someone who could approach it with wonder rather than fear. She needed help, though. Someone with the resources and expertise to mount an expedition, someone who wouldn't immediately turn everything over to the authorities. As she scrolled through news articles on her tablet, a name caught her eye, Marcus Thompson, the former astronaut who'd caused a scandal by claiming he'd seen evidence of ancient alien artifacts during his last mission. He'd been ridiculed and forced into early retirement, but he'd never recanted his story. Kira began composing a message, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Dear Mr. Thompson," she wrote, "I know why your stories about alien artifacts were true, and I can prove it. I need your help to find something that could change everything we think we know about humanity's place in the universe." She hesitated for just a moment before hitting send, knowing that this simple action would irrevocably change her life. But as she watched the message disappear into the digital ether, she felt nothing but certainty. The stars themselves had left humanity a message, and Kira Patel intended to be the one to answer it. Marcus Thompson's private observatory looked nothing like Kira had imagined. Instead of high-tech equipment and sophisticated computers, she found herself standing in a converted barn in rural Montana, surrounded by makeshift monitoring stations built from salvaged parts. The man himself matched his surroundings, weathered, rough around the edges, but with an intensity in his eyes that made Kira certain she'd made the right choice. "So you're the kid who's been flooding my inbox," he said, studying her with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. His silver hair was tied back in a ponytail, and his NASA jacket had seen better days. "You know how many crackpots send me proof of alien artifacts every week?" Kira pulled out her tablet, her hand steady despite her nervousness. "How many of them bring you this?" She projected her star map into the air between them, the geometric patterns spinning slowly in the dusty sunlight streaming through the barn's windows. Marcus stepped forward, his expression changing as he recognized the significance of what he was seeing. "These configurations, they match what I saw during my last mission. The patterns that NASA claimed were sensor malfunctions." He reached out to touch one of the floating symbols, his hand passing through the hologram. "Where did you get this?" For the next hour, Kira explained everything: the signal, the government intervention, her discovery of the star map. Marcus listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making notes on his own battered tablet. "You realize what this means?" he finally said, pacing between his jury-rigged monitoring stations. "This isn't just proof of alien life, it's proof they were here, in our solar system, leaving breadcrumbs for us to find when we were ready." "But we need help," Kira insisted. "Someone who understands ancient technologies and can help us interpret what we find. I've been researching, and there's one name that keeps coming up." Marcus's expression darkened. "Dr. Yuki Tanaka." "Yeah, I know her. Brilliant xenoarchaeologist, but she's not exactly stable. Got kicked out of academia for her radical theories about pre-human civilizations in the solar system." "Exactly why we need her," Kira argued. "She'll understand what we're trying to do." Finding Dr. Tanaka proved easier than expected. She was working as a curator at a small museum of space history in Osaka, Japan. Getting her to trust them was another matter entirely. When they first approached her after hours in her cramped office, she nearly threw them out. "More conspiracy theorists," she scoffed, her short black hair streaked with purple highlights. "I get enough harassment from your kind online, thank you very much." But when Kira showed her the star map, Dr. Tanaka's professional skepticism crumbled. She spent hours analyzing the patterns, comparing them to archaeological records from ancient civilizations on Earth. "These symbols," she muttered, pointing to specific configurations, "they appear in petroglyphs across multiple continents, dating back thousands of years. We always assumed they were representations of constellations, but this suggests they were copying something they'd been shown." As night fell over Osaka, the three of them huddled around Dr. Tanaka's desk, planning their next move. They knew the government would be monitoring official channels, looking for any sign of unauthorized expeditions to the Kuiper Belt. They would need to be clever. "I might have a solution," Marcus said, pulling up schematics on his tablet. "Remember the Stellar Dream? Private research vessel, disappeared in the Kuiper Belt 3 years ago during a routine survey mission." Dr. Tanaka's eyes widened. "They never found it." Because they weren't looking in the right place, Marcus grinned. She's right where I left her, fully supplied and off the grid. Had to hide her when things went south with NASA, but she's still spaceworthy. You stole a research vessel? Kira asked, incredulous. Liberated, Marcus corrected. And she's perfect for our needs. Small enough to slip past standard detection grids, but equipped for deep space research. Getting to her might be tricky though. Dr. Tanaka was already packing her research materials. I have contacts in the Japanese space program. They don't all think I'm crazy. We can arrange a routine maintenance check of one of the orbital platforms. That gets us halfway there. Kira watched these two brilliant outcasts planning what amounted to a heist in space, and felt a mixture of excitement and fear. What had started as a simple signal analysis was turning into something far bigger and more dangerous than she'd imagined. I should tell my parents something, she realized aloud. They think I'm still at the observatory in Hawaii. Marcus and Dr. Tanaka exchanged looks. Kid, Marcus said gently, after this, nothing in your life is going to be the same. You understand that, right? We're not just bending some rules here, we're going to break wide open everything humanity thinks it knows about its place in the universe. Kira thought about her comfortable life back home, her plans for college, the future she'd mapped out. Then she thought about the signal, pulsing through space for thousands of years, waiting for someone brave enough to answer it. I understand, she said firmly. And I'm ready. Dr. Tanaka nodded approvingly. Then we leave tomorrow. The orbital platform's maintenance window opens at dawn, and we'll need every second of that coverage. As they finalized their plans, none of them noticed the small drone hovering outside the museum's window, its cameras recording everything. In a secure facility thousands of miles away, a group of serious-looking individuals watched their preparations with growing concern. Should we move to intercept? One asked. No, replied another, studying Kira's face on the screen. Let them proceed. They may succeed where our official expeditions have failed. But keep tracking them. If they find what we think is out there, we'll need to be ready. The stellar dream lived up to her name. As Kira floated through the ship's dimly lit corridors, she could hardly believe they'd managed to reach her. The orbital platform maintenance ruse had worked perfectly, almost too perfectly. Dr. Tanaka's contacts had created a wireless dead zone around their approach vector, and Marcus's piloting skills had done the rest. Now, 3 weeks into their journey to the Kuiper Belt, the initial excitement had given way to a tense anticipation. The ship's systems were operating at peak efficiency, thanks to Marcus's meticulous maintenance during its hidden years, but strange things had started happening as they ventured deeper into unexplored space. Navigation systems are glitching again, Marcus announced from the pilot's chair, his fingers dancing across the holographic controls. Third time today. It's like something's interfering with our sensors. Dr. Tanaka looked up from her workstation, where she'd been analyzing the geometric patterns from Kira's signal. The ancient texts I studied spoke of guardians in the void, technologies left behind to protect important sites. We might be approaching their sphere of influence. Kira adjusted the scanning frequencies, trying to cut through the interference. The signal they were following had grown stronger, but also more erratic. Sometimes it seemed to come from multiple directions at once, as if being reflected off invisible surfaces. Look at this, she called out, highlighting a section of the sensor readings. The quantum fluctuations in this region are off the charts. According to these readings, space itself is being warped. A sudden shudder ran through the ship, causing loose items to float free of their secured positions. The main lights flickered and switched to emergency power, bathing everything in a red glow. Multiple system failures, Marcus reported, his voice steady despite the crisis. Main drive is offline, auxiliary power struggling. Whatever's out there, it's affecting everything with a quantum processor. Dr. Tanaka rushed to secure her research materials. The Guardians, she muttered. They're testing us. Kira's mind raced. The geometric patterns she discovered weren't just a map, they were a key, a message. Maybe they were also instructions. She pulled up the original signal data on her tablet, one of the few devices still functioning. Everything with quantum processors is failing, she said, thinking out loud. But what if that's the point? The civilization that left this message existed thousands of years ago. They wouldn't have used quantum technology. They'd need something more, fundamental. Her fingers flew across the tablet's surface, reconfiguring the ship's few remaining analog systems. Marcus, can you reroute power through the backup mechanical relays? The ones you installed as a failsafe? Smart thinking, kid, Marcus grinned, already making the adjustments. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. As the ship's essential systems came back online through mechanical controls, the strange interference began to make sense. It wasn't random, it was a test. Anything too advanced would be disabled, forcing them to rely on simpler, more reliable technology. There, Dr. Tanaka pointed through the main viewport. That distortion in space, it's forming a pattern. They watched in awe as the void ahead of them seemed to fold in on itself, revealing what looked like a tunnel through space. The walls of the tunnel pulsed with the same geometric patterns Kira had discovered in the original signal. It's beautiful, Kira whispered. And artificial, Marcus added. No natural phenomenon could create something like this. The question is, do we go in? Dr. Tanaka was already checking the structural integrity readings. The tunnel appears to be stable, and our simplified systems should continue functioning. We might never get another chance like this. Kira stared into the swirling patterns of the space tunnel, remembering the moment she'd first detected the signal in that basement observatory. Everything since then, the government interference, their daring escape, this impossible journey, had led to this moment. We go in, she said firmly. This is what we came for. Marcus nodded, his hands steady on the manual controls. Helm answering. Taking her in nice and slow. The stellar dream glided forward into the tunnel, its hull creaking slightly under the strange gravitational forces. The patterns along the walls seemed to respond to their presence, shifting and changing as they passed. These patterns, Dr. Tanaka said, recording everything with an old-style optical camera. They're not just decorative. They're telling a story. Look, these sequences keep repeating, but with subtle variations. It's like they're showing the history of different civilizations. A sudden alert from their simplified monitoring systems caught their attention. Something massive was registering ahead, hidden behind the tunnel's shifting walls. Energy readings are enormous, Marcus reported. Whatever's generating this tunnel, we're getting close to its source. The tunnel began to widen, the patterns along its walls growing more complex and intense. Kira felt her heart racing as they approached what appeared to be an enormous chamber opening up ahead of them. My God, Dr. Tanaka breathed, pressing her hand against the viewport. It's exactly as the ancient texts described. The archive of the stars. As the stellar dream emerged from the tunnel, they found themselves facing a structure that defied comprehension. A massive crystalline complex floated in space, its surface covered in the same geometric patterns that had led them here. But unlike the static patterns they'd been following, these were alive with energy, pulsing with an inner light that seemed to reach out to their ship. Multiple contacts. Marcus called out. Small objects approaching from the structure. They watched as a swarm of crystalline probes surrounded their ship, scanning them with beams of multicolored light. Kira felt a strange sensation in her mind, as if something vast and ancient was gently examining her thoughts. Look, she pointed to her tablet, where the original geometric patterns were shifting and changing. They're not just showing us the way anymore. They're welcoming us home. But before they could celebrate their discovery, a new alert sounded. Marcus's expression darkened as he checked the long-range sensors. We've got company, he announced grimly. 3 ships just emerged from light speed. Government signatures. They followed us. Dr. Tanaka gripped the back of his chair. How? We were so careful. Kira remembered the strange ease of their escape, the perfect conditions for their maintenance ruse. They let us lead them here, she realized. We did exactly what they wanted. The crystalline probes surrounding their ship began to pulse more rapidly, and the massive structure ahead of them started to glow with increasing intensity. Whatever was about to happen, they were now caught between the government ships and an ancient alien installation that was clearly powering up for something extraordinary. The real test, it seemed, was just beginning. Time seemed to slow as the crystalline structure pulsed with increasing power, its light casting strange shadows through the stellar dream's viewport. The government ships were approaching rapidly, their weapon systems undoubtedly powered up and ready. They're hailing us, Marcus announced, his hand hovering over the communications panel. Don't answer, Dr. Tanaka said sharply. The moment we open communications, they'll try to override our systems. Kira barely heard them. Her attention was fixed on the alien probes surrounding their ship, their light patterns shifting in increasingly complex sequences. Her tablet was going crazy, the geometric patterns morphing and multiplying across its screen. Wait, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. Look at what the probes are doing. The swarm of crystalline objects had begun moving in perfect synchronization, forming a barrier between the stellar dream and the approaching government vessels. Energy patterns rippled between them, creating what looked like a translucent shield. They're protecting us, Dr. Tanaka breathed. Just like the ancient texts described, the Guardians recognize those who solve their puzzles as worthy of protection. A new signal cut through their communications system, bypassing their security protocols. But instead of the expected government ultimatum, their speakers filled with a strange, harmonic tone that made Kira's teeth vibrate. The structure, Marcus pointed through the viewport. It's opening. The massive crystalline archive was indeed transforming, its surface flowing like liquid metal to reveal an entrance large enough for their ship. The probes began shepherding them toward it, their protective barrier maintaining position between them and the government vessels. Multiple weapons locks. Marcus warned. They're not going to let us reach that entrance without a fight. As if in response to his words, the government ships opened fire. But their energy weapons diffused harmlessly against the probe barrier, the attacks absorbed and redirected into space as bursts of multicolored light. The choice is ours, Dr. Tanaka said quietly. We can surrender now, let them take control of this discovery. Or we can trust in what led us here. Kira stared at the geometric patterns still dancing across her tablet. They'd changed again, forming what looked like an invitation. We go in, she decided. Marcus? The old astronaut nodded, his hand steady on the controls. Helm answering. Taking us in. The stellar dream glided forward into the archive's entrance, the crystalline probes maintaining their protective escort. As they passed through the outer layer, their ship systems began responding to some unseen influence, guiding them deeper into the structure. The interior was beyond anything they could have imagined. Vast chambers filled with crystalline data storage units stretched in every direction, each pulsing with its own inner light. The architecture seemed to defy physics, with spaces that folded into themselves and corridors that appeared to extend infinitely. This isn't just a library, Dr. Tanaka said, her voice filled with wonder. It's a repository of everything they knew, multiple civilizations, spanning millions of years. The patterns we followed, they're just the simplest part of their language. A soft chime echoed through their ship, and a docking port materialized in front of them, perfectly matched to the stellar dream specifications. As they locked into place, the structure's atmosphere began matching their own. Environmental readings are stable, Marcus reported. Air composition identical to Earth normal. They're accommodating us. Or they prepared for us, Kira suggested. Maybe this whole facility was designed to wait until we were ready to find it. The moment their docking procedure completed, new patterns emerged on the crystalline walls around them, forming what appeared to be a pathway leading deeper into the archive. The harmonic tone they'd heard earlier returned, but now it seemed to carry meaning, not in words, but in impressions and concepts that bloomed directly in their minds. "It wants to show us something," Kira said, already moving toward the airlock. "Something important." "Hold on," Marcus called after her. "Those government ships are still out there. They'll find a way in eventually." "Then we better hurry," Dr. Tanaka replied, gathering her research materials. "Whatever this place wants to show us, I suspect it's why they've been trying to find it for so long." As they prepared to enter the archive proper, their ship sensors detected the government vessels taking up position around the structure's exterior. But the facility itself seemed unconcerned, its ancient systems continuing their predetermined protocols. The airlock cycled, and they stepped into a corridor that seemed to be crafted from light itself. The walls rippled with information, star maps, mathematical formulae, and historical records all flowing together in an endless stream of knowledge. "Look at this," Dr. Tanaka pointed to a sequence of images forming nearby. "These aren't just records, they're warnings. Something happened to these civilizations, something they wanted future species to be prepared for." Before she could elaborate, a new set of patterns emerged, more urgent than before. The harmonic tone shifted, becoming almost mournful. "It's showing us Earth," Kira gasped, watching as a familiar blue planet appeared in the light patterns. "But, something's wrong. These calculations, these trajectories." Marcus studied the data with growing concern. "These are impact projections, astronomical events. According to this, we're not the first civilization to face this kind of threat." The archive's message was becoming clear: it wasn't just a repository of knowledge. It was a warning system, created by ancient species who had faced extinction-level events and wanted to help future civilizations survive them. But as the full scope of the threat facing Earth became clear through the archive's displays, they realized they had an even bigger problem. The government ships weren't just trying to contain their discovery. They were racing against time. And if the archive's calculations were correct, time was nearly up. The archive's central chamber was a perfect sphere of shifting light, its walls displaying countless streams of data about imminent astronomical threats to Earth. Kira, Marcus, and Dr. Tanaka worked feverishly to understand the warnings as the government ships continued their attempts to breach the structure's defenses. There, Kira pointed to a sequence of calculations flowing through the light patterns. "The archive is showing us a dark matter filament on a collision course with our solar system. The effects would be catastrophic: gravitational distortions, orbital disruptions, possible extinction-level events." Dr. Tanaka was recording everything she could with her optical camera. The previous civilizations must have faced similar threats. "Look at these records, they're showing multiple species that either survived or perished based on their response to cosmic disasters." A deep rumble resonated through the structure. Marcus checked the portable sensor he'd brought from the ship. "They're trying to cut through the outer layers. The crystalline probes are holding them back, but they're adapting their weapons." "We need to focus," Kira insisted. "The archive isn't just warning us, it's offering solutions. These patterns here, they're engineering schematics. The ancients developed technology to deflect dark matter streams, to protect entire solar systems." The harmonic tone that had been their constant companion suddenly shifted, becoming more urgent. New patterns emerged around them, showing Earth from different time periods. They watched in awe as the archive displayed humanity's evolution, from early primates to modern civilization. "They've been watching us," Dr. Tanaka realized. "All this time, they were waiting for us to develop enough to understand their message." But why us? Why now? The answer materialized in the patterns around them. Earth's position in the galaxy, its specific combination of elements and evolutionary history, had made it uniquely suited to produce a species capable of understanding and using the archive's knowledge. Look at these timing sequences, Marcus said, his voice tight with concern. According to these calculations, we have less than 6 months before the dark matter filament begins affecting our solar system. The government probably knows this, it's why they've been searching so desperately for this place. Another rumble, stronger this time. The protective barrier of crystalline probes was beginning to falter under the sustained assault. They had minutes, maybe less. Kira's mind raced. The archive had chosen to reveal itself to her first, through that signal at the observatory. There had to be a reason. Her eyes fell on her tablet, still displaying the original geometric patterns that had led them here. We can't let them take control of this knowledge, she said. They'll classify everything, waste precious time with bureaucracy and power plays. We need to give this information to everyone. Dr. Tanaka's eyes widened as she understood. The patterns, they're not just a key to this place. They're a communication protocol. If we could broadcast them globally. We can use the archive's own transmission system, Marcus finished, already moving to what looked like a control interface. But we'll need a way to encode all this data into a format Earth's systems can understand. Kira held up her tablet. We already have it. The algorithm I used to decode the original signal, we can reverse it, use it to compress and transmit everything the archive is showing us. The chamber's lights pulsed in what felt like approval. The harmonic tone shifted again, and new interfaces appeared around them, offering access to the archive's full transmission capabilities. They're through the outer layer. Marcus warned. Inner defenses are failing. Kira connected her tablet to the alien interface, her fingers flying as she modified her algorithm. Dr. Tanaka fed in the critical data about the dark matter threat and the defensive technologies, while Marcus worked to boost the transmission strength. The chamber filled with blinding light as the archive's full power was channeled through their makeshift broadcasting system. Kira's tablet screen blazed with energy as it processed more data than she had thought possible. Transmission commencing, she announced. The signal is going out on all frequencies, encoded in the geometric patterns. Every radio telescope on Earth will receive it, and my algorithm is already in the public domain, anyone can decode it. The chamber's entrance burst open, government agents in space suits flooding in with weapons raised. But they were too late. The transmission was already spreading across space, carrying the archive's vital warning and its offered salvation to every corner of Earth. The agent's commander stepped forward, lowering his weapon as he took in the scene before him. Do you have any idea what you've done? He demanded. We've given humanity a chance, Kira replied, standing tall despite her exhaustion. This knowledge belongs to everyone. The archive chose to reveal itself now because we're ready, not just technologically, but as a species. We can face this threat, but only if we face it together. The archive's lights dimmed slightly, its task completed. The harmonic tone changed one final time, becoming almost musical. Around them, the patterns shifted to show new images, countless alien civilizations working together to overcome cosmic threats, sharing knowledge across the gulf of space and time. This was never just about warning us, Dr. Tanaka said softly. It was about bringing us into a legacy that spans millions of years. We're part of something bigger now. As if in response to her words, the archive began to reconfigure itself. The crystalline structure shifted and changed, transforming into something new, not just a repository of knowledge, but a beacon for humanity's next great adventure. Kira looked around at the government agents, now standing down as they too were caught in the wonder of the moment. She thought about the signal she'd discovered in that basement observatory, and how it had led them all to this point. The archive had done more than save humanity from an immediate threat. It had given them something equally precious, a future among the stars, and the knowledge that they weren't alone in facing the challenges that future would bring. As the first messages of confirmation began arriving from Earth, indicating that the signal was being received and decoded, Kira smiled. Their journey had started with one teenager's curiosity about a strange signal from space. It would end with humanity's first steps into a much larger universe.